Usually when we talk about endangered languages, we tend to frame it as a loss of history. We say things like, oh, we're losing stories, or, we're losing songs.
Which is absolutely true, of course. That is a huge, huge part of it.
Right, but today's deep dive into the Khwe language suggests something. Well, something much more profound. It suggests that when we lose a language like this, we might actually be losing a specific way of processing reality. That we aren't just losing words, we're losing a different way to smell or taste or even touch.
That is not an exaggeration at all. We are looking at the Khwe language today, this linguistic marvel hidden away in the Okavango Delta region of southwestern Africa. And if you think English is complex, Khwe is, it's running on a different operating system entirely.
We have a pretty big stack of sources to get through: linguistic papers, historical records, and some, frankly, tragic reports on modern displacement. But maybe let's start with the basics. Who are we actually talking about here?
We're talking about a group of roughly 8,000 people. They're part of the Khoe language family. And geographically, you should picture the Caprivi Strip, that narrow panhandle of Namibia, and then into the wetlands of Botswana, Angola, and Zambia. It's a dialect continuum.
A dialect continuum, which means...
This just means the language isn't one single thing. It shifts and it morphs as you move across the map, sort of like a gradient of color, but it's all recognizably the same language.
Okay, got it. And just to clear this up right at the top, the name, I've seen it spelled Kxoe, sometimes Khoe.
Right. So the standard now, based on something called the Paducah Declaration from back in 2000, is K. Khwe. And it's really important to stick to that because a lot of the older terms you'll find in the literature names like Baragwina are actually pejorative.
Those are names that outsiders gave them then.
Exactly. They often translate to really dismissive things like people of the unknown or wild people. Kxoe is simply their word for person. It's what they call themselves.
Right, so 8,000 speakers. In the world of global linguistics, that's flashing red lights for endangered.
Oh, definitely.
But why is this specific language such a heavyweight? Why are linguists so obsessed with its complexity?
It really comes down to just density, the sheer density of it. If you look at the phonology, the sound system, it's almost overwhelming. To give you a baseline, English gets by with about 24 consonant sounds.
Sure. B, C, D, F, we all know the drill.
Kxoe has roughly 70.
70. Wait, so they're working with a toolkit almost 3 times the size of ours just to build basic words?
Precisely. And a huge chunk of that comes from the clicks. Now, I know people have heard of click languages, maybe from Xhosa or Zulu further south.
Yeah.
But Kxoe is part of the original source of those sounds. They have 36 distinct click phones.
See, that's the part I really struggle to wrap my head around. To my ear, a click is a click. It's just a sound you make. How do you possibly get 36 distinct versions of that one noise?
Okay, you have to break it down. Think of it like a coordinate system with 2 parts. First, you have the influx. That's the suction itself. Where is your tongue when you make it? Is it behind your teeth? Is it on the roof of your mouth? On the side? That gives you the base sound. There are 4 of those in Kxoe.
Okay, so that's the position, like north, south, east, west, basically.
A good way to think of it. But then you have the efflux, and that's the release. How do you let the air go after the click? Is it silent? Does it come out with a pop? Is it breathy? Do you vibrate your vocal cords? In Kxoe, they combine those 4 positions with 9 different releases.
So it's like playing a chord on a piano. You're not just hitting one key, you're layering multiple things at once to get a specific texture.
That is a perfect analogy. It is absolutely layering sounds. And some of these chords are incredibly rare. Kxoe is the only language we know of that has a prenasalized voiced click.
Okay, break that down for me. Prenasalized voiced click. What is my mouth even doing there?
All right, try to picture this. You have to start humming, that's the voiced part, while you're creating the suction seal with your tongue and letting air flow through your nose that's prenasalized, and then you release the click, all in a fraction of a second.
I'm trying to imagine doing that. That sounds like rubbing your stomach and patting your head, but, with your tongue and nose.
It's an incredible level of articulatory gymnastics. It's something most of us, as English speakers, we basically age out of the ability to learn it. If you don't pick it up as a toddler, your brain just struggles to map those movements.
It's amazing that an infant can just absorb that. But give it to me now and I'd probably just choke.
It creates the symphony of sound that makes English look like a 4-piece garage band. And that's just the consonants. The vowels aren't exactly simple either.
Oh, no.
They have 25 vowel phonemes. They use diphthongs, so sliding between two vowel sounds like in boy or cow. And they have nasalized vowels where the sound resonates through your nose.
And it's tonal on top of all that. The pitch changes the meaning.
Drastically. Early analysis suggested maybe 9 tones, but the more recent work has settled on 3: high, mid, and low. But here's the kicker. They have something called tone sandy.
I saw that in the notes. That implies the tone of a word isn't even fixed, right?
Exactly. Imagine the word cat is pronounced with a high pitch. But if you say black cat and black has a low pitch, the tone on cat might actually shift to a mid pitch, just to bridge the gap between the two.
So it's like a social chameleon. The word changes its personality depending on which words it's sitting next to.
That's a great way to put it. It's like a chemical reaction. You can't just learn the words on flashcards in isolation. You have to learn how they behave in a sentence.
That seems incredibly difficult to process in real time. You're not just listening for the words, you have to listen to the melody of the entire phrase to figure out what's going on.
It suggests a very high context way of communicating. You're always anticipating the relationship between words, not just the words themselves.
Which, actually, that's a perfect segue into the grammar.
Yeah.
Because it seems like relationship is the key theme here, too.
Mm-hmm.
I was reading about how they handle pronouns, specifically the word we, and it made English feel unbelievably lazy.
It really does. In English, if I say, we went to the store, you have no idea if I mean me and you, me and my wife, or me and an army of people. It's totally vague.
Right. I could mean we, the two of us on this deep dive,
Yeah.
or we, as in all of humanity.
Hiwi just doesn't allow that ambiguity. As you said, it's a suffixing language. They add information to the ends of words, and they are so rigorous about gender and number.
How specific do they actually get?
They mark gender and number even in the first person. So they have a specific word for we. That means me and one other male.
Wow.
And a totally different word for me and one other female, and another for me and a mixed group.
So the language forces you to constantly acknowledge the identity of who you're with.
You cannot speak about a group without defining its composition. It builds social awareness directly into the grammar. You just can't hide behind a generic we.
It's almost like the language itself is checking your ID. Who exactly is with you?
Precisely. And that specificity carries over into how they tell stories. I saw you had a note on serial verb construction.
Yeah, it sounds so industrial, like an assembly line for verbs.
And it works like one. It's a very efficient way to narrate. In English, we might say, he took the knife and then he cut the meat. 2 separate actions joined by an.
Action 1, then action 2.
Right.
A Khwe speaker might just string the verbs together. He knife, take, cut, meat.
Very efficient.
But the really fascinating part is the grammar tags, the suffixes that tell you when it happened or how. They only put those on the very last verb in the chain.
So the first few verbs are just raw action, and only the last one gets the timestamp.
Exactly. The last verb is like the locomotive pulling this whole train of action. It creates a very fluid, rapid-fire way of describing a complex event as one single continuous flow, not a list of steps. This brings us to the part of the research that honestly just stopped me in my tracks. We've talked sound, we've talked structure, but what about perception? The big aha moment for me was how Khwe speakers categorize their senses.
Ah, yes. The verb
And that translates to...
Well, see, that's the problem. We don't really have a single translation. In English, we have taste, smell, and touch. 3 very separate buckets.
Completely separate. Touching a wall is a different universe from smelling a flower. One's my hand, one's my nose.
Right. But for Khwe speakers, those 3 experiences, taste, smell, and touch, are all covered by this one verb, ham.
So they're all bundled together.
Yes. They have a separate word for seeing, which is ha, and one for hearing, ka. And if you think about it, those are the distant senses. You don't have to be near something to see it or hear it.
True.
But the contact senses, the ones where the world is physically meeting your body, they're treated as one unified experience.
That's a profound philosophical shift. It implies that for a Khwe speaker, tasting a piece of fruit and feeling the rough texture of a stone are just different flavors of the same core sensation.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it, about the neurology. If your language groups them, do you actually perceive them as more connected? In English, we separate them so rigidly, but in Khwe, there's this recognition that they are all proximal experiences, things happening up close.
It's like they have a single proximity sensor verb. I am experiencing something right here next to me.
That's a great way to put it. And you see similar kind of blending with numbers.
You mean the word Kxoe?
Yes. Kxoe is the word for 3, but it also works as a verb that means to be few or to be a little.
So 3 isn't just a number, it's also the feeling of scarcity.
It fuses quality and quantity. The number 3 is the definition of a few, which is really unique among African hunter-gatherer languages. Usually the number systems are very distinct. Here, the number 3 is tied to the concept of a small amount.
It really paints a picture of a worldview that is deeply observational, deeply connected to the physical world. But this brings us to the history and the conflict.
Yeah.
Because this language didn't develop in a vacuum.
Not at all. And this is where we have to sort of overturn a common historical narrative. Usually when we talk about African history, we talk about the Bantu expansion. About 5,000 years ago, you have Bantu-speaking farmers moving south and east, displacing the indigenous hunter-gatherers.
Right. The standard story is that the farmers have the numbers and the technology, so their language just takes over.
Yep.
The conqueror writes the dictionary.
That's the usual pattern. But in this region, the Okavango and Zambezi, the linguistic evidence, tells a totally different story. The Bantu languages that moved in their languages like Yei or Mukushu, they actually adopted clicks from the Kxoe languages.
Which is not normal.
It's extremely rare. Usually the dominant language imposes its sounds. Here, the incoming Bantu speakers heard these complex clicks and actually integrated them into their own speech. We call it paralexification.
Paralexification. Sounds technical.
It just means a parallel building of vocabulary. But what it implies is that the co-speakers must have held significant status. They weren't just being pushed aside. They likely had ritual knowledge or environmental knowledge that the newcomers respected. You don't borrow the sounds of a people you see as inferior.
So the hunter-gatherers were, linguistically speaking, the cool kids on the block for a while.
In a way, yes. Their language had prestige. The problem is, over thousands of years, this seems to have backfired on the Khoe.
How so?
Well, once the neighboring Bantu languages adopted clicks, they started to sound more familiar. It became much easier for a co-speaker to learn and switch over to, say, Tswana, because the sound system wasn't so alien anymore. It greased the wheels for their own linguistic assimilation.
Wow. That is a cruel irony. Their own influence made it easier for their language to eventually be eroded.
Exactly. And that erosion is speeding up right now. We're seeing something called semantic broadening, which is a very clinical term for what is really a cultural tragedy.
Give me an example of that. What does that look like on the ground?
Okay, take the word Angara. Traditionally, this word meant something very specific. It described a ritual act of making marks on the body or in the sand during a healing ceremony. It was a sacred act.
Okay. And today?
Today, it just means to write. Write your name on this government form.
So the deep, sacred cultural context is just stripped away, and it becomes a utility word.
The shell of the word is still there, but the ghost inside it is gone. The meaning is broadened until it's generic. And this really mirrors what's happening to the people themselves. You can't separate the language loss from the land loss.
The notes mention that many Kiwi speakers describe themselves as landless. And this isn't just a feeling, it's actual policy.
It's a mix of things. Conservation policy in Botswana and Namibia often excludes traditional inhabitants from national parks. But the darkest chapter really involves the military.
This is the 31 Battalion.
Yes. During the Namibian War of Independence in the 70s and 80s, the South African Defense Force actively recruited Khwe men.
Why them, specifically?
Because of their incredible tracking skills, again, that deep environmental connection was weaponized. They were phenomenal soldiers in that terrain.
And when the war ended in 1990, South Africa pulled out.
And they took about 4,000 Kxoe and Kxoe people with them. They were afraid of reprisals from the new Namibian government. And they moved them from the lush Okavango Delta to a tent town in a place called Schmidtsdrift, South Africa.
Which is a semi-desert environment, isn't it?
It's a moonscape compared to the Delta. I mean, can you imagine taking people whose entire language is built around wetlands and rivers and dense bush and dropping them in the arid Karoo? They lived in tents for over a decade.
When you displace a community that completely, you just fracture all the social structures that keep a language alive.
Of course. The elders aren't walking the bush with the children anymore. You can't teach the word for a specific medicinal plant if that plant doesn't exist where you live.
And usually, this is where you'd hope schools could help. If you can write the language down, you can preserve it.
Yeah.
But the story of the writing system, the orthography, is just a mess.
It's a classic ivory tower failure. In the 1950s, a brilliant German scholar, Osman Kohler, he developed a system to write Khoe, did all the hard work mapping those 36 clicks.
Sounds great.
Except he published all his work in German and French.
You're kidding. So the people who actually spoke the language couldn't read the manual on how to write it.
Exactly. It was a project for other European academics, not for the community in the Kalahari. It was a scientific specimen, not a living tool.
That is just so incredibly frustrating to hear.
It took until 1996 for new scholars to finally sit down with the Kxoe community and revise the system into something they could actually use. But even today, that writing system has no official status in Namibian schools.
So if you're a 6-year-old Khoe child, you go to school and you're taught in English or Tswana.
And you learn very quickly that your home language is for the bush, and these other languages are for success, and that's the psychological tipping point. That's when a language really begins to die, when the children stop wanting to speak it. It's devastating. Because, going right back to where we started, we're not just losing a code, we're losing that symphony of 70 consonants. We're losing the ability to say we with that incredible precision.
We're losing a unique map of the human mind. Every language is a different solution to the problem of how to describe the universe. And Khwe's solution bundles senses, it fuses number and quality, and it demands social awareness in every sentence.
It makes you look at your own language and realize how much it filters out. We think English is this neutral window onto the world, but it's just as biased in how it slices reality up.
That's the big takeaway. We think we see the world as it is, but really we see the world as our language lets us describe it.
So here's the thought to leave you with. We talked about that verb alam, the one that means taste, smell, and touch all at once. If the Khwe language vanishes and that word disappears, does the human capacity to experience those senses as one unified feeling disappear with it?
Does a piece of reality itself change when the word for it is gone?
Something to think about. Thanks for diving too deep with us.
My pleasure.